Hey everybody, it's another edition of Unbreakable podcast. It's Greg, and it is Friday, May the 30th. We're almost done May. Uh Hot Stevie Day here in Pennsylvania. I'm with my buddy Coco over there. If you were watching yesterday, we did a weekly movie classic and we talked about Smokey and the Bandit, that great movie from the 70s. And I said, we get a lot of people saying, boy, either wish it was the 70s, 80s. That seems like a lot of fun times back then. Yeah? Some people lived through that time like I did, 60s, 70s, 80s, and some people didn't. And but kind of fantasize what it would be like to go back in time. When I was growing up, like in the 70s and 80s, we had a certain romance fantasy about the 50s, because think about it. There was Happy Days, there was American Graffiti, and even the movie Back to the Future went back to the 1950s, remember? So there was a certain fascination about life back in the 50s. Well, nowadays, 2025, there's a certain fascination about life in the 80s. People want to go back to that time for whatever reason, or if you weren't alive during the 80s, you kind of wonder why, what it was like. Well, anyway, I thought we would do a section in the show, maybe once a week, called Remember When, where we could talk about life in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And I can give you my personal perspective after living through there. And if you lived through that era like I did, maybe this will spark some memories for you. And if you did it, maybe this will encourage you to explore more about that era. Because it was a lot of it was fun. I mean, a lot of it wasn't. But we're going to talk about different aspects of the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And today I thought we would start off and we would talk about fads. A fad is something that comes and goes. It's wildly popular for a time, you know, like a special toy that everybody has to have at Christmas one year, you know. Uh, but then it kind of fades away, and usually it fades away. It never really comes back again. And if it does come back, it never comes back as strong as it used to be, So I did a little research and I listed some of the fads that were popular back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And you probably remember a lot of these, or maybe you will think of some of your, you know. Uh, when we talk about the 60s, my glasses because old and I can't see. That's what happened to you, oh, like I am. Your eyes start to go. Okay, so 60s. They have Beatlemania. I don't know if that was a fad. Certainly, uh, going as crazy as they did about the Beatles was. Uh, I mean, people still love the Beatles. I love the Beatles, but we're not in Beatlemania. We're not running after Paul McCartney, the radio star anymore. But so I guess in a way it was kind of a fad there for a year or two. Uh, Bell bottoms, remember bell bottoms? That also was like some of these like blend into the 70s, and then some blend into like the 80s. Uh, Mini skirts. I remember mini skirts. Oh, do I? I mean, that was back in the late 60s. Remember that swing? A lot of the fashion came from England, London, and mini skirts and things like that. They swing, sexy 60s, there was a lot going on, like the war, Vietnam War and stuff. We had to take our minds off of stuff, right? So, the mini skirt was one thing. I remember going to Phillies games in the early, uh, the 70s, and they had what they called the hot pants patrol. Remember that? They had the usherettes. They dressed them. Bill Giles was the promotion he got from Phillies back then, who eventually became one of the owners. He suggested that they asked the usherettes to dress in hot pants, red hot pants. And they did, and that's I didn't complain about it. It was an awakening, let's just say, you know. But like any fad, it faded away. Um, what else? Afros. Yeah, afros were maybe, I don't know. I don't have an afro. Maybe afros were popular before the 60s. But I think we started to really notice afros in the 60s. Remember the Mod Squad, Link, Clarence Williams III, he had the big afro there. And I think that's Black Panther movement. That's when we started seeing more afros. You know, they did last in the 70s. I wouldn't tell guys were afros. And, uh, but even me, I had a perm at one time. Can you believe that? That was probably one of the stupidest things I did. But in the 70s, you want to talk about the fad. In the 70s, that was sort of a fad for a while that guys would get perms. And I guess they still do from time to time, but not like that. Back in the 70s, it was like the thing, along with leisure suits, those were hideous. And I had like a whole rainbow amount of leisure suits in my closet. Oh, God, I think about it now, I want to throw up. With flowery shirts. These guys used to go to the disco, late 70s, early 80s, and they'd have these flowered shirts unbuttoned all the way down to their navels. And they thought that was really cool with the gold chains, and the hairy chest and stuff. And yeah, yeah, it wasn't so cool. You think about it, yeah. You did a lot of stupid shit. But that's the way it is. That's life, right? You do stupid shit. You look back on it and it's like, yeah, it was pretty stupid. But that's life. That's what you do. So afros were around, and I had a perm back then too for about a couple months. Then after I had the perm, I realized how ridiculous it looked. I had an Uncle Henry who was one of my favorite uncles, and he was very honest and blunt. And he was like the one person who actually told the truth to me and said, "You look terrible." And he was right. He was right. And so I let it, they cut it again. I went back to the barber and they cut it, tried to cut the curls out. It took a couple of months until they finally grew out. But that was like really embarrassing. Ugh. The 70s had disco fever. You remember the Bee Gees, Saturday Night Fever, and the late 70s, 77, around then, disco. I hated it. I hated disco. Luckily, it didn't last long. It was a fad. It was popular for a couple of years. It went on probably a little bit too long, and it should have. Uh, but it was every radio station would want disco, disco, disco. People got sick of it. They had like a ballparks anti-disco night. Bring your records, let's crush it and stuff, with bulldozers. Yeah. Uh, yeah, it was just bad because it was too much. People wanted to get back to rock and roll, rock. Then heavy metal came into being, and new wave music in the 80s and pop. And just people had it with disco. Even guys who didn't do disco for a living, like country guys, would do a disco, you know? And it was like craziness. Like Frank Sinatra, I'll do disco, just to pile on. And it just wasn't right. It wasn't right. Anyway, so that was definitely sad. Platform shoes. Remember that? I think Elton John helped to get those popular. Elton John. One of the things about Elton John, other than his music, was his dress, his fashion. He wore the sunglasses, and he wore the different kind of outfits. But one thing Elton John always had from the get go was platform shoes. Remember that? Like the album cover, Goodbye Yellow Brick Road, these giant platform shoes. He really started or helped start that uh, that's fad, and guys wore them there for a while. You talk about photo, right? You go into a disco or a bar or something, guys wearing big, thick platform shoes with the leisure suit and the chains and the hair sticking out of his chest. I mean, what the hell? Yeah, I was going to say, what woman would go out with a guy like that? But apparently they did, because now those people are married for 50 years. Duh. What else? Tie dye. Tie dye was very popular back in the 70s. Tie dye. I mean, tie dye. I think tie dye is one thing that lasts a long time. I remember seeing tie dyes in the 80s, but I think 70s, late 60s, 70s. That was when you saw a lot of tie dye. Yeah, the hippies. Yeah, they called them the hippies back in the late 60s. People used to hang around in San Francisco, the summer of love, see a lot of tie dye and stuff. So, hey, tie dye's always been around. Um, yeah, the 80s, neon colors. Yeah, think that's kind of true. We would see, uh, yeah, probably like really bright. That was the 80s. The 80s, everything was big in the 80s. Hair was big on women and men. It was long, but it was also big. You used the hair dryer and you poofed it out, you know? Hair was like really stacked up high. It just poofed out in the sides. Everything about the 80s was big, you know? We had Reagan in office, and everybody thought they were going to die because there was going to be a nuclear war, any minute now. So people just lived like everything was big, music, the fashion, the hair, things on TV like Dallas and Dynasty, and it was just a different time, man. It was just different, really different. Anyway, so I got things mixed up here. Got the in and out and down. Some of the fads in the 60s, lava lamps. You remember having a lava lamp? I don't really remember having a lava lamp. I remember seeing them. And I guess we knew people who had lava lamps. And I don't think I remember my family having lava lamp. Barbie dolls, that's when Barbies really started to get popular. I mean, now Barbies are very popular, especially after the movie Barbie. Um, but back in the 60s, that's when Barbies really kind of took off. And that's when you saw Barbie like houses come and Ken, and it just really exploded there. Some more 70s fads. Again, these are things we're talking about that may have been really popular at one time, but didn't last. Corduroy was very popular in the 70s. Remember, did you ever wear a corduroy? Especially with like corduroy jackets, corduroy pants. Yeah. Leisure suits I already talked about. I had a whole stable of colors in my closet. I got to admit it. I had a bunch of leisure suits, but that's what was popular. Guys, thank God, somebody had the common sense to keep the basic jacket and tie and white shirt. I mean, that'll never go out of style, no matter what, you know? Because I mean, I lived through some pretty horrible fashion trends, especially in the 70s. And you're always going to have your basic suit, three-piece suit, uh, tie, jacket, white shirt. That's going to be basic, no matter what kind of trends or fads are happening in the world. What else? Uh, Circular sunglasses. Yeah, I mean, Elton John certainly helped out. John Lennon, one of my favorites. John Lennon, back in the 60s, even late 60s, with the round granny glasses. But they were very popular back then. CB radio, now we're talking. Now we're talking. I had a CB radio, a bass set. And I made a lot of friends through CB, but that was very popular. It just that was definitely a fit because it was yes, yeah, but uh, because it lasted a while and it faded away. But people all of a sudden got the uh, idea from truckers, had CDs in the trucks, and they communicated with each other. We talked about that yesterday when we did Smoking in the Bed. And people thought that was cool. Don't forget, we're talking about the 70s. We had no cell phones back then, no computers, no texting. There was really no way else to communicate other than like walkie talkies or something. So if you had a CB radio, you thought, wow, this is cool shit. Wow, this is high technology. You know? I mean, you're talking to somebody, if you had a powerful enough antenna and microphone, you could talk to somebody in Canada from Pennsylvania across, probably not across the country. That would be more like ham radio. But CB, and that was the thing. Who had the biggest antenna? Who could outblock the other person? It was a whole other world, back then. And then, yeah, when the movie Smokey and the Bandit did come out in 1977, that just made the CB radio craze go even bigger. And like I said, it eventually died out, like everything else does. And now you don't hear much about CB radios, but sometimes things come back around again, you know, like old jeans or something that you thought, wow, I had these as a kid. I should have kept them. And then they come back again. So maybe one day CB radio will come back again too, as a form of communication, right? 80s, oversized jewelry was popular. Yeah, I guess I kind of remember that. I remember the girls in college had the big hair again, and the big dangle earrings, the big necklaces, the big bracelets hanging off, the big earrings. Yeah, so I kind of remember big jewel. And like I said, everything was big back then. That might be my one word to describe the 80s. Big. uh, yeah, new wave came into being. All of a sudden, you had groups like a flock of seagulls. Really weird. The synthesizer, it was like less guitar, which wasn't good. More synthesizer music. We came off of disco and then we went into like new wave. So you had synthesizer music, the big drum beat, drum machine, you know, instead of using a regular drum, you had this. Yeah. Uh, so yeah, I mean, the music was different. Underneath it all, you always had rock. There was always rock. I mean, and back in the 80s, you had the arena rock. You had groups like Motley Crue, Def Leppard, Van Halen, great groups. And there was always the heavy metal, always the rock beneath everything. You could find, in the 80s, you could find the pop stations, you could find the new wave stations that would play like a flock of seagulls or whatever. The Brits, like it seemed like another British invasion was happening in the 80s. We had a lot of these groups coming over, like Culture Club, and a lot of Australian groups coming over to Men at Work. Remember them? Um, so yeah, but if you went to FM, right, and FM was becoming more and more prevalent, popular in the 80s. And that's where you could find your basic rock stuff. Like we had here in Philadelphia, WYSP, WMMR, back in the day. So yeah, and then don't forget, in the middle 80s, 1985, Philadelphia, from I live 20 minutes away from Philly, we hosted, along with London, England, we hosted a Live Aid, that big concert. That's another thing that was kind of a fad during that time. benefit concerts. You don't have them as much anymore. You still have them for a certain extent, like God forbid there's an emergency in the world, an earthquake, or something going on. And you might have a group of artists getting together and doing a benefit concert, but nothing like live. Back in the 60s, you had Woodstock, late 60s. But Live Aid was the big one. That went in all day long. And Live Aid will be 40 years old this year in July. Um, that was just a big concert. And so it's come to think of it, we really don't have fun things like that anymore. So so what else? 60s. Oh, we had some of the toys in the games. Every year, if you remember with me, there's always something for Christmas I have to get. That must get present. Do you remember? Now you were the same way. Whether you were a parent back then and you needed to get your kid something, or you were a kid yourself and you wanted something special for Christmas, there was always like one thing. Like parents would go and like they would beat up each other again, race it into cars. And the old lady swinging her handbags, get away from it. I saw it first. I mean, Christmas is supposed to be the time of goodwill to men, happy cheer. And then you got these people fighting over Cabbage Patch Doll or something, or they'd be lining up, early in the morning outside Penny's or something, just to get in the damn door. And then they'd open the door and you'd be like a stampede cannon or running in the store, try to grab a Beanie Baby or something. It was crazy. It was craziness back in the 80s back then. But yeah. So here are some of the popular 60s toys that came up. Rock'em Sock'em Robots. Remember that? I I had Rock'em Sock'em. Yeah, these mechanical guys. You put the head down, if you can hit the chin, the head pops up, and that's like the knockdown. And it's mechanical. I mean, it was just, now you look at it, and it's like so primitive, like we're talking like the Stone Age or something. But that's the way it was. It was a lot of fun. And again, we didn't have computers. We didn't have video games back then. So we had to make do with what we had. And we thought it was cool. Easy bake oven for the girls out there. It'd be like the 10-year-old girl pretending she's mommy, making, oh, I want to make a cake. And apparently you could make stuff in there. You really could. Or whip up like one cookie or something. I don't know. And and then you had Etch a Sketch. Remember Etch a Sketch? You could make all kinds of pictures with it. Then you would see in the paper where this one like really nerdy kid like made this beautiful Etch a Sketch, like of a flower or something. And if you remember Etch a Sketch, it you can't it never lets off the line. You have to keep going with the line. And then you shook it to erase it. And maybe you have a good picture up there, and maybe your brother or somebody comes and erases it, and you go back to it, and the Etch a Sketch screen is blank. You go, Mom, Joey erased my Etch a Sketch. Yeah, it was something like that. What else was it called? G.I. Joe. I absolutely had a G.I. Joe. And he was dressed in military fatigues, had boots on. If you stripped G.I. Joe, he had painted underwear on, not real. And the G.I. Joe was not anatomically correct, but he had this like painted and you could dress him and stuff. And you had his weapons, his guns, and his hat. And, that was it. G.I. Joe. Hot Wheels cars. Remember Matchbox cars? They had the Matchbox, all different kinds. They was these little cars, and they were really popular. They were like a fad too around Christmas time. Matchbox cars, and you could get like a catalog with a checklist, and you checked off what cars you had, which cars you didn't have. and Hot Wheels. A Slinky. Remember the Slinkies? They were like wire things, like they would walk around. You would use them on your stairs, you know, on Christmas morning. The kids would be up at the top of the stairs. What the hell you doing up there? Oh, you play with my Slinky. Well, that was like a big thing. You put the Slinky on the stairs and it walks down the stairs. Thinking about it now, that was really stupid. Wasn't it stupid? But, people bought it. And that was like entertainment for us. We didn't know any better. So you watch the Slinky go down the steps. Big deal. The Slinky could not go up the steps, but the Slinky would do the steps up. Hey, Mr. Potato Head. Yeah, but the thing is, what we used to do as kids back in the 60s, we used real potatoes. So you'd get a real potato that your mom's not using, that you're probably not going to have for dinner, because God forbid you use the potato for Mr. Potato Head, and then you're going to peel the potato and have it for dinner. No, you can't do it. So you get a real potato, and they had the plastic eyes that you stuck in, and it smelled because that potato smelled. And then you put the nose on, and the teeth, the ears that would stick out. And Mr. Potato Head always had a hat. But as far as I remember, Mr. Potato Head really didn't have hands or legs or arms. He just had like the basic face, maybe a bow tie or something. Well, then Mr. Potato Head wasn't as fun anymore because they would give you a plastic potato to use. What the hell? Why even have Mr. Potato Head if they're going to give you a plastic potato to put all the face and the things on? Part of the fun was getting a real potato and sticking it in there. Yeah. Play-Doh. You remember Play-Doh? You would play it, it smelled bad. Your hands would smell really bad. And then you would use Play-Doh. Some kids didn't know any better. They tried eating the Play-Doh. And as far as I know, nobody ever died. Who knows? But, so you would eat the Play-Doh. You would stick the Play-Doh on the wall. And it's like a silly putty. Remember silly putty, too? You'd get a glob of silly putty. And you would put it on the comic strips, the Sunday comics. And it was a big deal because you would take the silly putty off and you would see the comic strips on the silly putty. And I was like, wow. So you would sit there and look at that for like 20 minutes and wonder, how did they do it? Like something really stupid like that. And but some of the Play-Doh was the same thing too. Play-Doh, you would like make a snowman with it, like maybe yellow Play-Doh. Then you put like a glob of orange Play-Doh on top of that, and then the head would be blue. Then you'd make a carrot nose, all out of Play-Doh. I told you, life was tough back then, We were lucky, I can remember my mom. We were lucky if we got an orange for Christmas. An orange. Okay. And then we had bazooka bubblegum. Remember bazooka bubblegum? Oh, one of my favorite things about bazooka bubblegum was the comic insert. You'd get the bubblegum, which wasn't bad. The flavor would leave it after a while, just like any bubblegum. But you'd have the little comic inside. And that used to give me, and that was like a kick, And you would never, even though all these pieces of bazooka bubblegum, I can't remember ever getting a double of the comic. Never. And I thought, well, the guy who draws these comics must have drawn like a million different comics. And usually it was like a one panel gag or two panel gag. And you never got to see one. Anyway, what else? 80s, Cabbage Patch Kids. Now the Cabbage Patch Kids came out of Parkinson. Slide thank you. I got a little thing with Cabbage Patch Kids. And that was a must-have Christmas gift back then. Oh yes, Cabbage Patch Kids. They're 1983. 1983 was like the height of the Cabbage Patch Kids, and these Cabbage Patch Kids They sold like 3 million in 1983, the Christmas time. They peaked in 1985. They were originated at someplace out of Arkansas, and they were like between 20 and 40 bucks a piece, which back in the day, that was a lot of money. And each would be personalized with a name, a birth certificate, and which was kind of like stitched into the doll. And it was like a big deal, you know. And I don't even think they were that cheap, but that was it. You know, that was the must-have thing. You had to have a Cabbage Patch doll, especially between 1983 and 1985. If you did it, you were out of it. You where what the hell do you do? Yeah. So yeah, Cabbage Patch dolls. And then you had Tickle Me Elbow. Remember Tickle Me Elbow? Elbow was another uh must-have gift for Christmas. And it was a fad. It didn't last very long. And then it faded away. I mean, do you have a Tickle Me Elbow? If you go into your garage, my foot, or your attic, or your basement, wherever you keep all the stuff, if you find the Cabbage Patch doll or a Tickle Me Elbow or one of these other fad toys I'm talking about from back in the day, let me know. We'll sell it together. We'll make some money, okay? Because yeah, Tickle Me Elbow was another fad, and it came from like the Sesame Street elbow, and yeah, Twister. Remember the game Twister? That's still around. That is one game that's survived. And you can play Twister, you know, get on the floor, your socks, and you twist around people, and your hand has to go on, you spin the spinner, left hand on the red spot, right leg, like right foot on the green, and you go around it. It was really weird. But you could get into some precarious positions there, you know. Anyway, people got engaged through games of no, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Roller skating. Yeah, that was a fad. Although, you know, I'm seeing more and more commercials now. Is roller skating coming back? You tell me. Because I'm seeing commercials now for like the Pennsylvania Lottery. Have you seen that commercial where Gus the Groundhog is roller skating? And I'm thinking, now why would they have him roller skate? You know, back in the day, roller skate was really popular, like in the 70s and 80s. Because I remember like Friday nights, kids would go out roller skating, and it was tied into disco. They played disco music at the skating rink, and it was a lot of fun for kids. But I'm seeing that more and more commercials or have roller skating involved. So is it coming back? Really? Well, you never know. It could be. 70s. Oh yeah. Rubik's Cube. Remember Rubik's Cube? I'll tell you what. That was Rubik's Cube was developed in 1973. This sounds phony, but it's not. By a Hungarian math professor somewhere in Hungary. And he invented Rubik's Cube. And you know who brought it over to America? 1980, that Hungarian actress herself, Zsa Zsa Gabor. Did you ever hear of her? Or do you know of her? She had a sister named Ava Gabor. Zsa Zsa used to go out with Merv Griffin. Now Merv Griffin had the talk show. Now we're talking about some old people. The talk show, like Phil Donahue, and Merv Griffin got really rich because he invented Wheel of Fortune and Jeopardy. He actually invented those games. So he got really rich. He sold the syndication rights. And Merv Griffin eventually bought a casino, Resorts, the first casino down in Atlantic City. Right. But we're getting off track. But he used to go out with Zsa Zsa. So Zsa Zsa Gabor brought the Rubik's Cube to a party in 1980. And she showed it to some of her elite hoity-toity friends who partied with her. And they thought, wow, this is pretty cool. You Rubik's Cube, it's a six-sided cube, and you try to match them all the colors. That was really hard to do. And after that, Jaja got some people involved. She might have sold the rights or got this professor to sell his rights, and they made a lot of money because all of a sudden it boomed in the 80s, the early 80s. Rubik's Cube. Everybody had a Rubik's Cube. Not everybody could solve it, except some people would throw it at the wall because they couldn't solve it, or they tried to peel off the color stickers and or take the cubes out and rearrange them. And what really pissed you off was you'd get these like genius kids on TV who could solve it in like 10 seconds. And there you are doing the Rubik's Cube for like 12 hours a day for like 6 months. You can't solve the damn thing. And you got this kid, this geeky kid, who would go on and say, no, it's all done. What? That was a piece of cake. And it's like you just wanted to poke him in the eyes, you just got to. Anyway, Rubik's Cube was very popular, and it's still around. You can find it. But they said the thing about Rubik's Cube was you could use it as a game, as a lot of people did. You could use it as like a conversation piece back then because people didn't have much to talk about, so they so they had Rubik's Cube. Or it was a piece of art. You could put the Rubik's Cube on your end table or your coffee table, and it's there like for art. If somebody wanted to pick them up, play it, fun. Or you could say to them, no, you don't touch my Rubik's Cube. It's there. It's a piece of art. Can't you tell? Anyway, yeah. So Rubik's Cube, yeah. Uno, I still like Uno, and you can still find it around. There's a card game, and you put the pick up four card on your four people play, and you end up screwing the guy next to you because you hit him with the draw four cards and stuff. Uno came into being when I was growing in the 70s. Said Trivial Pursuit. Really a fad, although it's still around, but it was very popular in the 80s. I remember the basic Trivial Pursuit game. That was like a big Christmas gift for, I think, even more than one Christmas. There's a fad that, it faded away because you had the cards with the answers on the back with different topics. And then it started branching out into like the Beatles, Trivial Pursuit, Disney, like all these different themes, But it was a lot of fun. But when video games came into being more and more than just Pac-Man, Trivial Pursuit kind of died away. But if you go to a local toy store, you could still find Trivial Pursuit around. So some more before we end, some more fads in the 80s. Big hair we talked about, like the mullet, the long in the back, short in the front, like a mohawk up on top. Boom boxes, carry these big boom boxes on your shoulder. And the Walkman. Remember the Walkman? Oh my God. Kids in the 80s. I remember the first day in college. I started college in the 80s. I still remember my first day. It was like 8 o'clock in the morning. I was getting ready to go up to my first class. I'll never forget that first day in September, all these young kids there, and they all have Walkmans in their ears. And I couldn't afford that shit. I didn't have it. So I'm like, what the hell? They all Walkmans. Anyway, so but it doesn't go out of style nowadays. When you have earbuds, stuff you stick in your ears, whatever. MTV, how about that? MTV, 1981, August the 1st, 1981, was the first show, the first broadcast of MTV. And that's back when MTV was actually good, when they actually showed music videos. The very first video they played on MTV was by the Buggles called Video Killed the Radio Star, which was pretty appropriate because eventually it did. But the 80s were known as MTV, man. And MTV made some of those people. I mean, Michael Jackson, Prince, Madonna, some of your heavyweight acts in the 80s would have probably been popular because their music was great for the time. But MTV certainly helped them along because you could get on the radio, you could listen to a song by Madonna or Whitney Houston or whoever, but it just brought it to life when you watched the video on MTV. And it was on what they called heavy rotation. So it would be played a lot during the hour. And they had the countdown, which videos were the most popular for the week. So there was a certain innocence about MTV back in the day. You had your VJs that would come on, kind of like act like DJs, only doing video. Martha Quinn, she's still around, by the way. She's cute. She was a cutie patootie. And nowadays, I don't even watch MTV anymore. I don't even know what they have. Probably a lot of reality stuff and quiz shows, a lot of stuff that's not videos. Or if they do have videos, it's probably a lot of rap and stuff. Although I could say probably Taylor Swift and stuff would dominate. But back in the day, 1981, August the 1st, that's when you would see a lot of the Madonna. There are a lot of Hall and Oates, Bruce Michael Jackson, Prince had a big decade there. And there you go. So what else? Oh yeah, video games. Yeah, that's when video games started to get good. I mean, you went from Pong, which was the basic video game. How boring. It was like table tennis, hitting this white ball back and forth. And you thought it was pretty cool because you tried a bank shot, like off the TV screen, the bottom and top. And if you beat yeah, but you couldn't move your paddles. You could only move your paddles up and down. That's all you could do. So you went from that to like, what's the thing that eat the things, yeah, whatever. Yeah, whatever. But you went from that to like real games, You started getting into like Space Invaders. Remember Space Invaders? And different kind of games. Well, that just opened up the whole thing, because we're just talking, you were on like the verge of computers and personal computers. Don't forget now, in the 80s, not too many people had home computers. You had to like be really, really rich or be connected to like some sort of be like a computer programmer or something to have a home personal computer. Or so what you would do is you'd go to an arcade and you would play your Space Invaders. There are Mario, remember Mario? And that's where you would play your arcade games, which you still could, I guess, but that's the only way you could do it. And then when the technology just exploded, and then in the 90s, started coming personal computers. You could 3:00 in the morning. I did this. I gotta admit, I did this. 3:00 in the morning, I'm there playing stupid. I have to get up for work or get up for school. That's right, because I was in college through most of the 80s. And I'm playing 3:00 in the morning. I'm playing a stupid Pac-Man. Pac-Man, that's it, Pac-Man. So yeah, that was like the big entertainment. So anyway, Space Rangers, Pong, yeah, we talked about that. A few other things we talked about. Oh, Rubik's Cube. Get this. In the 80s alone, we're talking 70s, 80s, when Rubik's Cube was at its height, they sold 350 million of Rubik's Cubes. I don't know if you call it pieces of Rubik's Cube, whatever. Units. 350 million. That's like one for each person in the United States of America or some damn thing. So that professor back in Hungary, he's eating a lot of, he was eating well back then, I'll tell you that. $350 million or whatever units. Whew. I think, what did they charge for a Rubik's Cube back then? Like $10, $15, something like that, maybe. I don't know, I can't remember. But I mean, it wasn't like $1.99, you know? You had to pay a couple bucks to get a good Rubik's Cube. Pet Rocks. Do you remember Pet Rocks? Oh my God, what a ripoff. Pet Rocks was a fad, a Christmas fad. Basically, all it was a rock. It was a double flat rock. It wasn't a big rock, it was a small rock, like a river jack rock. You go out in your backyard and pick up a rock. And for people, whether you did have a pet or you had a pet, it was your pet rock. Well, to tell you how stupid, I've been like romancing about the 80s and 70s. And I'm thinking about this, and I'm thinking, we were real assholes back then. The hell? It's so you bought it like $5, $8. The pet rock. So you got the rock, and maybe they put a little grass in there in the box. It was a cardboard box, little cardboard box. It had holes punched in the top so the rock could breathe. And then maybe you had a few blades of grass in there because the rock has to sit something comfortable, right? And that was your pet rock. You'd bring it out and you'd walk it once a day, roll around the floor, dump it in some water, give it a drink, give it a bath. Just take care of your rock. It was like very inexpensive because you didn't have to feed it, you didn't have to take it to the vet, you didn't have to take it to the groomer. Why have a cat and a dog where you can have a pet rock, right? It never dies. Anyway, so yeah, that went out. That I think people started getting smarter and said, "What the hell are we doing? We paid $5 for this rock. It doesn't cost anything to go out and pick a pebble off the ground and to make the box, punch a few holes in it so the rock can breathe. What are we doing?" Anyway, so yes, to wrap it all up, this bad boy needs to be wrapped up. Some other things real quick. Preppy clothing. This was especially the 80s. Preppy clothing. Yeah, I do remember this. When I was in college in the 80s, a lot of girls would wear a lot of preppy clothes. And that was like canvas pants, polo shirts. Thank Ralph Lauren for that, or LL Bean, which is still around. Sweaters that you tie around your neck, like if you're going out to play some tennis, or maybe we'll sail. Let's have nothing to do of sailing on the pond. Even if you didn't have any money, you tried to dress like you did, like, I've got the latest polo shirt from LL Bean. Yeah, I must be pretty cool. So anyway, yeah, preppy clothing. We talked about MTV. Oh, enough of that. And the last thing in the 80s that I remember, the Brat Pack. Remember the Brat Pack? They were kind of a fad because John Hughes made all these, back then they were cool movies because he seemed like he was the hot director and writer. He knew how teens talked, even though he himself was like in his 30s. But he made like The Breakfast Club, 16 Candles, Ferris Bueller's Day Off, which was a fun movie. And a lot of those movies were fun. That's basically, again, the 80s was a lot of fun stuff. Yeah, well, I mean, we had some tough time. I mean, Reagan was in office, and he didn't know if the world was going to end. Unfortunately, he had AIDS. He was running rampant, and it was yeah, wasn't always the best of times back then, my friends. Ironically enough, Katie is across the room, sitting on her perch, which is actually a bed, and listening to 80s music. And as I speak right now, Madonna is singing True Blue. True Blue, baby, I love you. Deep, very deep lyrics, weren't they? Anyway, but the Rat Pack, yeah, they were a group of kids that hung around together. Tom Cruise was starting to become popular. Jesus, it seems like Tom Cruise has been around forever, huh? Huh? He's got the Mission Impossible movie out now. The Maverick, Top Gun. Well, Top Gun was popular in the 80s, since we're talking about the 80s. And of course, he made Risky Business back in the 80s. So, Tom Cruise has always been around. And I'll tell you what, I gotta give him credit. He does his own stunts most of it. And he is full of life. For an old guy like me, he is still doing stuff. And that's what you got to do. If you're an old guy like me, you got to still do stuff, right? You got to move so you feel good. And you can stay young, like me. All right. So that's it. So, as far as fads are concerned in the 60s, 70s. So I thought that was fun, reminiscing a little bit about that stuff, right? You don't want to go back there and live there, but think about it. You think about everything you've done in the past. It's not bad. As long as you don't stay in the past. You stay in the past, that's not good. That's not good. But once in a while, if you visit the past, you could actually learn from the past, and you could enjoy the past. You could say, "Wow, you know what? I survived that. If I could make it through the fads of the 60s, 70s, and 80s, Mr. Potato Head, I could make it through the crap that's wrong." Yeah. Still can't. There was a time they did Mr. Potato Head. It didn't actually lose potato. It still bugs me, you know what? Right. Okay, so anyway. So I thought maybe once a week we'd get together and we'd do this. We'd talk about, well, it's called Rememberable. And we'll talk about the 60s, 70s, and 80s. Huh? Because the 50s, even though I was born in the late 50s, that's a little bit before my time. And some of the other decades, like the 90s and stuff. So anyway, 60s, 70s, 80s, that's my wheelhouse. And we'll talk more about it as the weeks go. All right. Maybe we'll talk about the people back then. There are a lot of cool people. So really large life people. The Prince stuff. And we'll talk about that. So thanks for joining me today. Peace and love. And I'll be back again soon, huh? We'll talk about our regular stuff that we do on the broadcast. A lot of sports, Phillies. And I'll be back again soon. Peace and love. Everybody have a great weekend. Stay safe. Have fun. Talk to you soon. Bye.